We're discussing chapter 5, the vital role of the intellect. And this time we're going to be dealing with two concepts, which is initiative versus incentive and achieving success. So we'll start with the texts. And it says, sans intellectual governance, the mind functions through like and dislike, desire and anger, and other emotions. The pressures of the mind destroy your objectivity in action, resulting in loss of efficiency and productivity in your field of action. You will need a well-developed intellect to control the vagaries of the mind and direct it to your optimum output in life. The knowledge acquired through academic resources only qualifies you to work in the particular field of action you are engaged in, but that does not help you overcome the mind's distraction and interference with work. The intellect hardly plays its role, and the work turns out to be unproductive, even detrimental. So what we're seeing here is two aspects. So just admitting someone. So what we're seeing here is two aspects that he's covering, and the first one is something that we should be familiar with by now, where he says that without the intellect, and this we appreciate, the mind simply has its way of functioning. It deals with its particular likes and dislikes, desires and emotions. And you find most people in the world today are very impulsive, very emotional, completely dominated by the mind's, the mental aspect of their personality, because the intellect is not developed. Now, how we see that play out in terms of productivity and efficiency is the more your mind dominates the personality, the less dynamic, the less productive, the less efficient one actually is. So he says that it destroys your efficiency. And it destroys your objectivity. Remember, we equated last time objectivity to success and even enjoyment. If you want to be successful or you want to enjoy anything in life, you have to remain objective. And we know that that is achieved through intellectual application. So we understand by now, you should all have a clear idea that the intellect is very important in controlling the mind. Again, it's not there for us to stifle the mind, strangle the mind. Often people get the misconception, this mind sounds like a terrible thing. Let's just get rid of it. Even in that quote we give when Christ confronts Satan and Satan is offering Christ the world. And all that represents, Christ represents the intellect, Satan represents the mind. And Christ says to Satan, get thee behind me, Satan. He doesn't try to destroy Satan. He just says, you get behind me. You follow me, I don't follow you. And this is exactly the role that the intellect should play in one's life. Obviously, the mind, there is an aspect of the mind. The mind is a beautiful thing. The emotions are from the mind. Our desires, any form of action springs from a desire. So the mind is important in that sense too, and it enables us to function. But it must be governed by the intellect. So that's the first thing he mentioned. The next thing he mentioned, which we've also touched on, is this idea of knowledge. Now, knowledge that we gain from schools, universities, textbooks, especially now online learning, often all they're doing is qualifying you to work within a field. So they give you and prepare you to work in a particular environment. And that's no doubt useful. We understand that there are many specific fields of work, and you need a certain amount of knowledge to engage in those fields, to be proficient in those fields. But what we also must appreciate is that information, that knowledge, although it's important, we should not forego intellectual development at the same time. And this is unfortunately what's happened. We're going to cover a whole class on this, which is called the bane of the educational system. And we investigate why we've ended up in the position we're in. So again, when there is no intellect, which is predominantly the case today if we look around, and we find a lot of people are suffering. There are a lot of problems in the world, even minor problems. To the extent that you cannot manage or deal with your problems, to that extent, you must appreciate that the intellect lies fallow. So with no intellect, work suffers, and you succumb to the mind's wandering. It's like the mind wins that particular battle, as it were. So he continues, and this he goes on to say how we can thwart the intellect. So not thwart the intellect, sorry. How we get around this, how we're able to get around this particular aspect of the mind winning the battle. How do we prevent the mind from winning the battle? So what happens is we need to look at the fixation of an ideal. So this is the next topic that we're going to look into. So he says here, fix an ideal. You must constantly employ your intellect to circumvent the mind's negative influence upon your activity. To achieve this, you need to fix an ideal in life. An ideal represents your mission, goal, beyond your self-centered interest. So what is this ideal? It sounds very much like a goal, and it is. And this is one of the ways, in fact, if we look at the scriptures and the text, this is one of the ways in which one is advised to act. See, how do you act in the world? What's the premise on which one should act? There are many factors. In fact, if you look at the text, the Bhagavad Gita, a whole chapter he goes on how exactly to act in the world. He's giving advice to Arjuna, who has stopped acting. So there's many ways in which to act in the world. This is one of them, and it's the premise on which the other methods are affected. So the first thing you need to do is fix an ideal. So an ideal is like a goal. We can see it as a goal. What makes an ideal different from a goal is an ideal is something beyond your self-centered interest. So you may have a goal. No, I want to earn $1 million. For what? No. So I can buy anything I want. I can have a new car. I can have a nice house. That's not an ideal. That's a goal. And there's nothing wrong with that. But an ideal incorporates others. In other words, it is beyond your self-centered interest. That's what makes it an ideal. So often when we start discussing this concept of ideal, people think, okay, an ideal, I should be working in the interests of others. Maybe I should go do something for others. Maybe I should, start a soup kitchen, or maybe I should collect funds for the less needy, or the more needy. Sorry. It's not about that. See, what you have to appreciate is what makes an ideal is the intention. So where is your intention? In fact, one of the questions you can ask yourself in terms of establishing an ideal is, what are you working for? Who are you working for? See, if you answer that question, what am I working for? The answer could be, well, I'm working for my own profit. I'm working for my own wealth. Maximum, most people can incorporate its family. I'm working for my family. Okay, we can't say that's entirely selfish, but it's not such a great expanse in terms of becoming more unselfish. So an ideal must incorporate this ideal of being unselfish, an unselfish ideal that caters to others. So if you take, for example, you go into office, everybody goes into office, goes to work. Now, the question I pose to you is, what are you working for? Now, one person may go into the office, say they're working in the same team, working in the same department. One guy may be working just for his paycheck. No, I'm only interested in my paycheck. That's why I'm here, to get money to earn. Yeah, I've got a job to do. I do the job, of course. That's why they employ me, because I can't do this job. But he's purely just working for a paycheck for himself. The other guy comes into the office and he's actually genuinely, they're doing the same thing. This is what you have to appreciate. It's not changing your vocation, it's changing your attitude. The other guy comes in and he is genuinely working for the benefit, welfare of that company. He wants to ensure that the company attains a degree of success. You see, what do you have to appreciate? He's still getting his paycheck, but he's pitched an ideal for his work. And this is the difference. So he talks now about the circles of identification. The larger the circle of your dedication and service, in other words, the larger the ideal to which you can incorporate and incorporate various levels of people, the greater the ideal. Those who pursue their ideal develop an initiative to work. It gives them the energy and enthusiasm to enjoy their business. So this is the first thing he touches on when we're looking at initiative. Remember, this is initiative versus incentive. So if you look here on the board, you'll see these are what we call as circles of identification, and they align to the setting of one's ideal. So you see the smaller circle. The smaller circle means you are just working for yourself. Nothing other than that. For your own pleasure, for your own wealth, for your own well-being. You don't see anything beyond that. Now, if you're able to identify with a greater circle, that's why we call it circles of identification, i.e., this could be the family. And this usually happens when someone marries, gets a partner, begets children. They start working not for their own personal welfare, not for their own personal benefit, but for the benefit and welfare of that family unit. So you can say now he's working for an ideal because it's not for himself anymore. He's acting in the interests of his family. Stretch that further. A person who is able to identify with the entire community, his actions are dedicated towards their well-being, their welfare. Extend that further and further. You can appreciate the greater the ideal, the greater the circle of identification, the more enthusiasm you have to work. This is a law. This is why we are impressing this idea of an ideal. Remember, how to get an initiative for work. See, most people lack any initiative. In fact, there's a talk that I do called Look Forward for Monday Mornings. Now, I don't want to ask everyone, but how many of you actually Monday morning comes, you are enthusiastic? In fact, I'll ask you a question. Who looks forward for Monday mornings? Or who looks forward for Friday afternoons? I'm almost certain everyone that's working anyway will say, what a question. Come on, man. Friday afternoon. That's when we close up shop and we go home and enjoy the weekend. Everybody is working for the weekend. It's interesting because people are trying to get away from action for peace, when in truth, the best rest is in action. I'm not going to deviate because that's a whole talk on its own. If those of you who are interested, I can give you a link for that talk. Just message me. So what we're seeing is when we have this goal, not a goal, an ideal that encompasses larger and larger circles, we gain a greater and greater initiative to work. As I said, there's no initiative because people are selfish, self-centered. So people are only working for their own interest. And that is why this culture of incentives is thriving today. So opposed to such noble work culture, and when he says noble work culture, that's having an initiative to work, an unselfish ideal. So opposed to that, people the world over have adopted a self-centered, selfish attitude in their activity. Consequently, there is no initiative within oneself to work in any field. Thus sprung the necessity to introduce incentives for drawing people to work. So I'll explain it to you. I'll explain what has happened to break it down for you. So because there is no intellect, this is what we appreciate. People are functioning on the mind, by and large. No one's fault. We're not here to criticize or point fingers. We're here to understand what's going on. It's important for all of us to understand what's happening in the world, what's happening within ourselves in order to improve it. To improve the world, we need to do what? We need to improve ourselves, but we also need to improve the world. So we need an understanding of both. So we say that there's hardly any intellect, and that's because no one has taken the time and effort to develop it. So what happens? People function on the mind, and the mind has these desires. So you are purely interested in catering to the mind's desires. Those are the self-centered, egocentric desires of the mind. Now, when you function this way, and this is the majority of functioning on the mind, you require an incentive to work, something to inject or something to propel you into action. See, if we were to just briefly compare the two, when we have an initiative, there's an enthusiasm. Monday morning comes along and you're ready to go. If you're simply just working based on the mind's demands, the egocentric desires, Monday morning comes and that's the last thing you want to do is go to work. Nobody enjoys Monday mornings. I know, I've asked this question. Who enjoys the last day of the holiday or the first day of the holiday? Anybody will say, of course, that's obvious. First day of the holiday, then a whole holiday's ahead of you. Last day of the holiday means I've got to go back to work. So the entire work culture has been destroyed. Initiatives are actually an unhealthy practice which diminishes work output as the workers get neutralized to enhanced pay and perk. Incentives thereafter cease to promote work as opposed to the untiring initiative to achieve their ideals. Obviously, this is worded wrongly. It should be incentives are an unhealthy practice, which diminish work output. Sorry about that. So again, what we're seeing is that this is not natural. They don't, incentives, okay, they may get things going in the beginning, but slowly what we see is the work dying out. Moreover, incentives increase the self-centered and selfish desires among workers. And the proliferation of personal desires proves cancerous to the organization. That explains why giant companies and corporations have caved in. So with these incentives, you've got even two people within a department in an office competing against each other because they want to achieve that incentive, whatever it is. You know, they're dangling the carrot there. It could be a trip overseas or a new car or something they're offering. This is what we call as incentives, especially in the workplace. Now, you don't have to limit it to the workplace. It could be anything. In fact, you see it nowadays, especially with children. The parents get the children to act by giving them incentives. No, if you read so many books, I'll buy you an iPad. If you do all your homework, you'll get a treat. They're offering, they're functioning off incentives. So in the workplace, what this is happening is causing the conflict. You'll find two people working for the same company are in conflict with one another because they're trying to oust each other. They're trying to get ahead of the other person. They're not concerned at all about the company. They're trying to get ahead themselves. And this is why we're finding massive corporations and companies closing down. So you may ask, well, how can we correct this? How do we get incentives out of the workplace? Or can we get incentives out of the workplace and purely inject an initiative into people to work? And it's possible. But this problem cannot be solved by immediately discontinuing incentives. It has to be tackled carefully by first introducing the concept of working for an ideal. The employees would then develop the initiative to work for a higher cause. The emergence of initiative among employees should gradually displace the suicidal corporate practice of extracting work through incentives. So, of course, this is a culture that has grown now for many, many years, this culture of incentives. So what incentives do, they drive people, and no doubt it helps in getting action going. That we can't deny. So this culture has come about incentives, driven by incentives. So we're not going to change that culture overnight. But what he says is we can slowly start instilling. And when I say we can slowly start instilling, it's usually the leader in an organization, whether that be a company, whether that be a family, whether that be an organization. It's often the person at the top that sets the standard for others to follow. So if you find that the leader starts working with this ideal in mind, he's working for the genuine interest of the company. So you get a lot of these guys, they just want to make profit. Okay, the company should function. That much is there. But beyond that, they can't see anything. So whatever they can do to get profits, they'll do. They're not interested in much else. So what happens is this idea needs to come from the top, instilling this idea to work for the greater good, to work for the company. That guy, he stops taking any bonuses. He stops taking any incentives in terms of working. That sets the tone. See, you can't have the guy at the top taking big bonuses and this and that, because that sets the culture for the rest. So it's often the leader or the people at the top that have to change the culture. If you can't change the culture from the top, in fact, they say culture comes from the top, revolution from the bottom. So slowly it needs to be done. It doesn't happen overnight. But once the initiative overtakes the incentives, what we see is productivity increases. When there's a genuine desire to serve a greater cause, there's so much enthusiasm to work. There's an initiative. You don't need someone dragging you into the office. You are there. You want to be there. So this solution can be incorporated. It just takes time. Unfortunately, for generations, people with misled minds long for rewards without paying the price for them. They look for quick fixes. And this is obvious, the world today. Everyone is looking for immediate gratification. Earn a quick buck. How quickly can I make money? How quickly can I get food delivered to my door? It's all about instant gratification, quick fixes, they call it. Rare indeed are those who conceive anything beyond short-term gains, who would put in adequate effort to achieve their goals. Instead, people employ unnatural means to gain their ends. Thus arose the liberal use of fertilizers everywhere for imaginary unreal growth. Incentives act in much the same way as fertilizers. So you can see how the culture has created this monster, as it were. People, and this is again, it's a reflection on a mind-led behavior. So people that are mind-led need their desires to be catered to. And immediately, they need to have their desires fulfilled. This is the nature of desires. It needs fulfillment. So anything that comes quick suits them. But we all, I'm sure, can appreciate that anything worthwhile takes time. But who's willing to put in the effort? Take, for example, this class even. And this is something you have to ask yourself. How many are actually willing to put in the effort to fortify and develop the intellect? Hopefully, the lessons so far have given you some perspective of how important the intellect is. And that's one thing. And you may gain an awareness of that, and that's great. But how many are actually willing to put in the effort daily or weekly? We have this class to achieve that. You find most people, okay, they'll do it for a month and then maybe they drop off. I'm not saying all of you. I mean, it's been a very good effort from all of you to be continuing to come. But anything that requires effort, most people, I'll give it a go, but if it doesn't work out, then I'll move on to the next thing. So what happens is these unnatural means to gain their ends come about. And he gives an example here, and then this really helps the understanding of the principle. In the same way that they use fertilizers in food production now. See, the soil has got so bad from monoculture or whatever it is that there's hardly any nutrients in the soil. So what do they need to do? They need to introduce fertilizers to get the produce. Similarly with all these artificial fertilizers, we lack nutrients. It's actually quite ironic. So what do we need to do? We need to supplement our health with vitamins. This is exactly what incentives do in terms of your action or in terms of your work. They function much the same way as these incentives. So incentives function a lot like fertilizers in plants. Everyone okay till now? Okay. So the reason for the failure of incentives in business is due to their diminishing value. No doubt the introduction of incentives to workers initially boosts their action and production. But then the effect does not stay long. It gradually fades away and the employees lose their drive to work. The loss of their interest and enthusiasm is made up by alluring them with further incentives. Thus, the blunder is repeated until they are sick and tired of work, and production comes to a grinding halt. So, we did touch on this, but to reiterate, so incentives are put there. Why are the incentives put there? Because people are selfish, self-centered. So they need something external to themselves to drive them into action. There's no initiative to work because there's no intellect. So what happens? Incentive is placed there. And what happens? Wow, all of a sudden there's so much production. There's so much productivity. There's so much work going on. So no doubt the incentives initially create this highly productive atmosphere. But what happens, as soon as that incentive has been reached, then it drops off. People are no longer interested. Oh, I've attained the incentives. Now what? So what do they have to do? Push another incentive. But it can't be at the same level. No, if the first incentive was a holiday to Mauritius, now it's got to be something bigger. Well, the next one is to Thailand. If you say Mauritius again, I've already been there. I don't want to do that again. I'll just plod along and keep on working at this slow pace, just get my paycheck. So they got to add something extra. No, next is Thailand. Oh, that sounds good. And what happens? Again, there's a peak. The production goes up, productivity goes up. So let's just see here. Looks like there's a clarification. Does incentive equal desire. It's not necessarily equal to a desire. It is more that it arises from one's mind that is centered on the fulfillment of their desires. So when one is primarily concerned with fulfilling their ego and egocentric desires without any thought for anybody else, this is generally associated with mind-led activity. So for those people that are mind-led, mind-driven, who are only looking at fulfilling their own personal desires, incentives are given. So it arises, incentives arise from ego and egocentric desires. Now, if we look at an ideal is still a desire. You're still working, but it's more incorporating of a greater circle of identification. That's why we brought in this idea of circles of identification. So if you start working for the benefit of others, there's still a desire, no doubt. But that desire is not centered on one's selfish, self-centered interests. They are pitched at a higher level. When that happens, there is an initiative to work. Incentive is no longer required. So in both incentive and initiative, there's a desire. What you must remember if we go back to the chronology of action, an action cannot result without the backing of a desire, without the backing of a thought, without the backing of a vasana. So vasana produces thought, thought produces desire, desire produces action. So without desire, there's no action. Now, when we talk about initiative and incentive, we're talking about these, you could almost say the quality of that particular desire. See, the direction of that desire. When the direction is poor, it's termed as selfish. See, a poor quality desire is a selfish desire, something pertaining to one's own self, selfish benefit, self-aggrandization. When we're talking of a higher quality desire, it incorporates the benefit of others. Loka sangraha, they call in Sanskrit. You're working for the welfare of others. That gives you an initiative to work. Okay, so we understand that this diminishing value happens because with the incentive, yes, there's an initial drive to action, but slowly that diminishes. Companies close because they can't keep up. And this year it's Thailand, next year where is it? Next year after that, where is it? Eventually you can't keep up with the incentives, and when you can't keep up with the incentive, there's a crash in the productivity. When there's a crash in the productivity, there's no work being put out. Therefore, the company is no longer successful. In fact, it doesn't produce. It crashes. And you've set up all these emoluments, all these perks, all these pays that now can't be met. So it's very difficult to establish proper work culture based on incentives. So the problem with the use of incentives is that it is addressed to the mind. We know this. As opposed to initiative created by the intellect. Because only then the intellect can pitch an ideal outside the mind's self-centered interests. The mind's demands are insatiable. Remember, the mind is compared to a fire. Any amount of logs and wood and flammables you throw in that fire, the fire will consume. And this is exactly the nature of the mind. No matter how many desires it fulfills, it'll go keep on desiring. In fact, every time you indiscriminately fulfill a desire, many more desires spring up. And you are constantly chasing your desires. That's why he says the mind's demands are insatiable. The corporations, misguided by consultants, have been feeding the mind's demands liberally. Now, we're not blaming. They're doing this without even realizing that incentives is driving, supporting demand. It's not supporting the intellect. And they helplessly watch the effect diminishing to nothing. And when they say nothing, there's no productivity. A point of neutralization is experienced by the workers. On the contrary, the initiative to work can be increased by the intellect pitching up higher and higher ideals. The work then diverges to greater dimension instead of it converging to zero. And this is just a very simple graph on the board here that should help to understand this principle. So you'll see there's a gray line and there's a kind of pink looking line. Now on the left side, you've got the work output going from 0 to 100, and then a timeline. And that timeline, it could be anything, weeks, months, years. It's not important, and then it's not truly representative of any specific time. It could be different for a project or a company that's been going for many decades. But what we need to understand in point of convergence and divergence is with initiative, there is a divergence. So there is increased output. So it may start slow, and this is the gray line. You may find initially, while you're building that initiative, it takes time, remember he said, to build that initiative, to set an ideal. And most people are not used to this way of functioning. It's not a part of the accepted work culture. So they often say it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. You want to try and get ahead of everyone else. That's the rat race. It doesn't matter which rat wins, you're still in the right rat race. You're a human being. So anyway, the gray line represents having an initiative to work. And you can see by the end, work output goes all the way up. Eventually, when you're established in that ideal, your productivity can hit the top 100%, maximum productivity. Now, if you look at that other line, the pink line, the initial work output is huge because you're plugging in incentives. You're giving them something which they can immediately gain a benefit. Okay, that's something I want. I'm going to work for that. Anyway, they're already getting their paycheck. They're not happy with just a paycheck. They want something other, bonus, incentive. So you give them a nice incentive. They achieve that and then need to give another one. What is happening is diminishing output. Slowly, that output of work diminishes up until zero. And you can't service those incentives anymore. Work comes to a grinding halt, he says. Converges to zero. So that's with regards to initiative versus incentive in life. And we can appreciate how important, once again, chapter is the vital role of the intellect, how important the intellect is in establishing this initiative. See, we all engaged in action. This is what you have to appreciate. You may not be working in a job, but you're acting. Everyone is acting in the world. Inaction spells death. You can't get away from acting. So the question is, how are you acting? How are you functioning? If there's no enthusiasm for work, if there's no initiative, it's because you're functioning on the mind. You need someone to drive you. Oh, darling, will you go to the shop, please? I need a few things. Oh, yeah, and you can get yourself that thing that you want. Oh, yes, then I'll go. See, even in life, it functions like that. You need incentives to get you to go to the shop. This is a sad state to which activities in the world have been reduced. It's no laughing matter. Every action, you need some incentive to drive you into action. What kind of a state is that to be in? No, you want an enthusiasm, an opportunity to serve. This is achieved when the intellect is able to set that ideal to work. This is why we stress the importance of the ideal. And only an intellect can set and pitch that ideal. So the next aspect we're going to look at is success. And he breaks it down in this next topic. You'll see in the book, it's called 3 C's to Success. Now, the first thing we have to appreciate about success is that it is an effect. Success is an effect. See, we're all wanting success. There's nobody, I doubt there's anybody sitting in this Zoom classroom who wouldn't want success in their endeavors. No, I've got a list of things to do tomorrow, and I plan to fail. I plan to get none of them done. Nobody would say that. It's absurd. So everyone is looking for success. Now, that success may manifest differently for everyone. For someone, tomorrow's success could mean getting through an interview and getting a new job. For others, it could be making sure they get to work without crashing the car. For others, it may mean getting the kids to school on time for once. So success can manifest as different things, but at the end of the day, what we have to appreciate is that it is an effect. So if success is an effect, then what are the causes? See, for there to be a result, there needs to be a cause. There needs to be some form of input. And this is usually overlooked in the world today. Everyone is just looking at success. Oh, yes, I want to achieve success. Yes, I want to get that success, without looking at what they need to do to achieve it. So we need to understand what is the cause, we need to put in order to get the results we want. Now, those causes can be summarized as right action. So if we put in the right action, we should be able to gain success. And these right actions consist of the 3 C's: concentration, consistency, cooperation. 3 C's to success. It's very, very easy. We're going to be examining each one of them and just going through what they mean in terms of how they relate to right action. So the first one is concentration. Productivity in business, success in any endeavor. I'm reading from the book again. In any endeavor requires continual intellectual application to 3 disciplines. Those are the concentration, consistency, cooperation. They are the rudiments of achievement in any field of activity. These words are no doubt used liberally among management personnel, but few really understand, much less put them into actual practice. And the use of incentives can in no way substitute the fundamental principles governing production and success. So he starts here and going, obviously these are not by any means new concepts. Some of you, especially those that have attended any form of management workshops, anything, would have perhaps heard these words being used before. And it's very interesting because they often say, in order to gain any degree of success, you need to be able to concentrate. Well, what is concentration? Well, it's focus. You just focus on whatever you're doing. Well, then I ask you, what is focus? Concentration. And you even tell your kids, just concentrate on what you're doing and then you will be able to finish your homework. What do you mean by concentration, Dad? Don't worry about it. Just concentrate. See, we're not here to beat around the bush. We want to get down to the fundamental principles. What actually is concentration? There's one thing to say concentrate. Does anybody know what concentration means? And I'm not here to test you. This is exactly why you're here, to learn. So you'll find in a lot of these talks and these seminars, and I've heard it myself, They lavishly use these terms without actually defining what they mean. So the first point, or the first idea, is that is this idea of concentration. And in order to get to understanding, or in order to get to the end result of success, we need to break down these individual components and understand them exactly what they are. There's no good me just saying, well, there's 3 C's to success: concentration, consistency, cooperation. You get those down and you'll get success. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help anybody. So we need to define them. Otherwise, you leave here confused. So remember, Vedanta gets to the fundamentals of things. We want to break everything down into its fundamental components. So what is concentration? You gain concentration when your mind is with your action. The mind has a natural tendency to worry over the past or become anxious of the future. You need a developed, strong intellect to focus your mind on the present job. So I'm sure many of you by now who are following closely can surmise what concentration is. So what is concentration? To define it, when the intellect holds the mind on the present action you are said to be concentrating, even within this classroom. Are you concentrating on what I'm saying? Well, if your intellect is holding the mind, see, the mind has a desire to learn, but the mind has also a tendency to get distracted. Where does the mind get distracted? Thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future, worries of the past, anxieties of the future. This we covered in The Mind Wreaks Havoc. Particular natures of the mind. So this is the nature. You could be sitting in this lecture, and where's the mind going? I wonder what's for dinner. Well, 15 minutes, and then I've got to think about cooking. You could have slipped. You are said to have lost concentration. So when the intellect holds the mind on the present activity, your intellect holding your mind on what's being said. Similarly, my intellect holding my mind on what I'm trying to say. If I'm unable to do that and I start drifting off into something else, what is the ability to try and communicate these values? It's not going to be very good. So to the extent one can concentrate, to that extent one can achieve success, whatever that be. So it is the intellect that prevents the mind from deviating, holds it in place. The stronger the intellect, the better ability to concentrate. So that's as far as concentration goes. The employment of the intellect to hold the mind on the present action, whatever that action is. So if you're able to do that, you are concentrating. As soon as the mind slips, you've lost concentration. So that's the first aspect, the first C, concentration. The next is consistency. And he says, consistency is the skill of directing your actions towards the ideal goal set to achieve. See, we've said, important, set an ideal in life. Pitch an ideal. The intellect pitches an ideal. But the intellect, having pitched the ideal, must also make sure that the actions are directed towards that ideal. So it plays 2 roles here, the intellect. It pitches the ideal, it sets the ideal as something nobler, something more productive, something catering to a greater welfare. And then it ensures that the mind stays on track to guide you towards the attainment of that ideal. Consistency is impaired by the ramblings of the mind. So again, you may have chosen an ideal. You may have chosen a particular direction you want to take, and you're on a course. Now what happens? Suddenly you see something over there or something over there. Not literally. The mind is getting pulled this way and that way, distracted. So you may be aiming towards the achievement of a goal, an ideal, and you get distracted because the mind gets distracted. So your consistency in achieving that is impaired. So as you work towards the goal, the mind slips into other attractions. Again, this is just the nature of the mind. This we appreciate. The mind has a nature. So the actions then do not flow in the direction of the set goal. Just have a question coming up. Let's just address that quickly. So, does strategy thinking count as future or past thought, i.e., remembering a to-do list or order of actions that will be most efficient? So, this is a great question. This often comes up. So, now, when we talk about not letting the mind deviate into the past or future, this is pertaining to being in the action. This is pertaining to action itself. Now, that doesn't mean while we are planning, and this is, you said here, strategy thinking. Strategy thinking, another word for that is planning. You're trying to plan a goal. You're trying to plan your actions. It might be for the day, it might be for a project, it might be a long-term plan of action. Now, in that plan, you may want to refer to the past. Oh, what were the past failures? What were the past hindrances? What trouble did I run into last time I tried to do this? So you may recall on the past. This is in the planning stages. Likewise, you may allow a certain thought to go towards the future. Yeah. You can't achieve anything without pitching a future ideal, something that hasn't yet happened. Even in terms of one's personal growth and development, you're pitching something that you're not at present. You're trying to achieve a greater, better version of yourself. So in other words, your mind has to go forward. In fact, the intellect is taking it forward. So yes, in the planning stage, while you are setting out a plan of action, we may need to refer to past and future. Once the plan is devised, once the plan has been set and you start acting, then you must ensure that you maintain concentration on the present activity. Now, what usually happens is that there's a deviation towards the success. The mind wants to go towards the success. In other words, to the result of the action. This is where the mind has a tendency to go. Okay, I'm actually, but what am I getting? You know, you could be at work and it's like, oh, it's the 19th today. What day is payday again? Oh, yeah, and then when payday comes on the 26th or whenever it is, then I can do this, that, and that. And then, well, maybe I should look at booking something away. And what are you doing at work? Not what you're meant to be doing at work, that's for sure. You've lost concentration. So yes, there is an aspect of planning that you need to look backwards and forwards, but whilst acting, you must ensure you maintain a degree of concentration in order for your actions to be most efficient. If you start slipping to the result of action, karma palam they call it, fruits of action, you've lost concentration. If you lose concentration, the action is impaired. Imagine your thoughts are somewhere else. Where are they not? On the action. If your thoughts are not on the action, you don't achieve anything. This is why people get stressed in the world, because they can't concentrate. It's not because they've got too much work to do. You're given an X amount of time to complete a job, right? The only reason you can't complete it in X amount of time is because you lack concentration. You know, how often is the mind deviating? I know this for sure, because without an intellect, you can't concentrate. To the extent you lack an intellect, to that extent you lack concentration. To the extent to which you lack concentration, to that extent the mind deviates. To the extent the mind deviates, to that extent you can't achieve your goals. So yes, we need to take into account past activities, take into account future goals in planning, in strategic thinking, and then function in the present, directing our activities towards the attainment of that particular goal. So, consistency is the skill of directing your actions towards the ideal goal set to achieve. And we know that this is impaired by mind. So here your intellect plays a significant role to keep all actions moving towards it. When your intellect channelizes actions in the set direction, you gain consistency. The practice of consistency lends power, energy, strength to action. You observe this clearly in nature. Water flowing in one direction has power. Wind blowing in one direction has power. So does light focused in one direction. Similarly, if your actions are channelized in one direction, they become powerful. So we always turn to nature. Nature is one of the best teachers. Now, you'll see hydroelectric power. Often I was actually reading in load shedding, one of the reasons the city of Cape Town is always one level above. So if everyone's in level 3, Cape Town will be in level 2 because of the Steenbras dams. There's a hydroelectric power there. So what happens there? All the water pushes through a propeller and generates electricity. There's power. Similarly with wind. You know, if you want to, and this is a trick, if you want to get a fire going, you know, in winter when it gets cold and you build a fire, you either get a long straw or you put your fingers together and you focus the energy and push it in one direction. All of a sudden the flames come. Light, we all know the example with light, right? Magnifying glass. You can take just normal daylight and focus it in one point. You can actually end up burning something. So this is exactly what happens in consistency. Now imagine, even if you look at any achievers in life, whether that be in sport and business, whatever, they needed to have maintained some consistency. Imagine a Roger Federer, one day playing tennis, next day playing golf, other day maybe gymnastics. Do you think he'd be the player he is today? No, there needs to be a consistency, driving all those actions towards the ideal, towards that goal. So this is the second ingredient, the second component in achieving success, consistency. Finally, cooperation. So the third discipline is cooperation. To achieve an objective, you need the cooperation of others. It is difficult to be an achiever in life without the spirit of cooperative endeavor. Now, you'll notice in the textbook, if you go read there, he's given the example of Germany and Japan after the war. Both countries were devastated. And what happened there is they pooled all their resources. They came together and they worked to get the country going. Now, if you look in the world today, Germany is basically supporting the rest of Europe. Japan, highly successful. How did they achieve that? Spirit of cooperation. So what you have to appreciate is you cannot achieve anything by yourself. People are deluded to think, no, I did this. You may even say to me, come on, Craig, you're being modest here. You sitting there, you talking, you giving this lecture, and nobody else went and studied. You yourself have studied and got this information to relate to us. Therefore, how can you say you can't do this by yourself? Honestly, I can't. See, without this computer, where's the lecture? I didn't build this computer. I didn't know the technology behind it. Even language. Did I come up with the English language? No. So any action, if you deconstruct it, you'll find that so many people have contributed to that particular act. No, I have designed the latest Mercedes-Benz. Did you? The tires, the engine. You've just done the design and you claim the latest Mercedes-Benz is yours. And what about all the Mercedes-Benz that came before that? All contributed. So when you analyze, in fact, you can't do anything by yourself. You need the participation of others in order to achieve anything. So one of the ways you can do this, one of the ways in which you can develop the spirit of cooperation is by acknowledging that nobody is important, nobody is unimportant. Everybody has a role to play. Now, your job is to play that role to the best of your ability. You don't need to develop a superiority or inferiority complex. So with the third ingredient, cooperation, along with concentration, consistency, you should be able to attain success. In other words, you should be able to achieve your goals, achieve your ideals in life. So we'll just go back here quickly. I see there is a question. Michael, does ideal equal desire? In a way, it does. Yes, it's a type of desire. It's a better quality desire because it is. See, how do we define positive or negative in the context of desire? A positive, more nobler desire is one which caters to a greater welfare. What are you acting for? Lower form of desire means you're acting for yourself. Selfish, self-centered reasons. Full stop. More positive, better quality of desire starts incorporating the welfare of others. So in effect, yes, desire, ideal is backed by a desire, but it's of a better quality. Now remember those circles of identification. The greater and greater the circle of identification, the greater the quality of desire. Let me just find it here for you. So if we are able to, there we go. Imagine we can have an ideal to work. Every action we perform is in the interest of entire humanity or in the interest of all beings. What is that desire, that quality of desire versus somebody who is purely interested in self-gratification, self-satisfaction, self-aggrandization? You're going to appreciate both are desires, no doubt, because remember, we're all acting. The trick is, or the crux is, with what attitude we acting, with what quality of desire are we acting. See, a man of character, a cultured person, functions at a high level of desire because he has genuine interest in the welfare of others. That backs his action. Poor quality person, we say a person has a poor character. He's not really cultured because he's selfish, self-centered. So that determines it. So there's desire and there's desire. There's poor quality desire and high quality desire. Now, the higher your ideal, the greater the circle of identification, the greater the quality of the desire. Okay. Hi, Rainier.
I was just thinking of the question of balance. Each of those are, to me, it's like a three-legged table. You need three of them to support the table. In that case, I'd look at success as actually getting that table level. And to actually, you can't achieve success with an unequal table or level is not right. What do you think of that concept?
See, I get where you're going. From my understanding is you got to put in the equal amount of concentration, consistency, cooperation. Essentially, it sounds like that's the analogy you're going with. Is that correct?
Yes, so that success is the definition of the success is that you must achieve all three. You can't just do one or the other.
Correct. So to the extent one ingredient is missing. So say I say, let's make pancakes. So what do we need? We need flour, we need eggs, and we need milk. Okay? So we mix that all together and we make a pancake. I say, let's make pancakes. I've only got flour and water. Well, okay, you'll get something resembling a pancake, but it's not going to be a great pancake. So yeah, we need to ensure for success that all three ingredients are there. To the extent that one ingredient is lacking, oh, we didn't have enough of eggs, or we didn't have enough of water. To that extent, the outcome is affected. So, but what we find is you will gain success to whatever extent your intellect is developed. So if your intellect is developed 40%, you can effectively achieve things at a level of around 40%. It's not that your concentration is going to be at 100% and then your consistency is only at 20%, because the intellect is at a level. So it should more or less be equal. But yeah, you have to ensure all three ingredients are present to affect success.
Thanks.
Great. Fayez, with another question. So does it come down to the intention of the ideal goal outcome? It is either selfish or less selfish. So, so when you say, so does it come down to the intention? So what does what come down to, Fayez? So does it come down to the intention of, I'm not sure what the it refers to, what you're referring to in terms of the it. The ideal. So does an ideal come down to the intention of the ideal? So is it either selfish or less selfish? You see, the quality of the ideal is determined by the level to which you can identify. So you may have an ideal to support the family. That is an ideal, because it's not just looking at yourself. So it is an ideal. And so it's great. And in fact, this is the level of most people in the world today. They are not really interested in much else outside of the family. As long as the family is looked into, and that could be immediate or extended. No, as long as my family is fine, then that's okay. That's still an ideal, but you can compare that ideal to someone who is genuinely interested in the community. No, okay, one thing for my family to be okay, but is everyone in this community okay? In this neighborhood that I live in? You know, has everyone got security? Has everyone looked into? That could be your vision. You could be genuinely thinking about the entire community. So that determines the level of ideal. That's obviously a higher level ideal than just purely thinking about the family, and so on and so forth. So the more you're able to extend that identification, the more unselfish you become. Those circles of identification are based on the degree of selfishness. When you're very selfish, there's no ideal, in fact, it's a goal. When you are most unselfish, a highly, highly unselfish person, he has got all beings, genuine interest of all beings at heart. That's the highest ideal to which you can strive for, relative. There's one more than that, and that's the attainment of self, the highest ideal one can strive for. And self is just perfection in a human being. You okay?